The Iraqi government is in deeper crisis than usual. 5 cabinet ministers and 30 members of parliament loyal to the Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr have suspended their participation in parliament and the government.
Yes, the reason, the meeting between their Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and US President George Bush, a man they call a criminal. Well, we can now go straight to Jordan, where that meeting is taking place, and we can see live pictures there where President Bush has just arrived in Amman. Oh, we can now go straight to Al Jazeera's Mike Hanna, who is also there for us. Mike, we've just heard about those Shia ministers and legislators who've pulled out of Maliki's government. Could this actually work to Maliki's advantage by strengthening his hand in dealing with those militias?
Well, certainly that is a possibility, Mariam. We know that President Bush will be bringing a very strong message to Prime Minister Maliki that he has got to stamp down on the militia within Iraq, militia that the US believes is creating a great degree of instability within that country. And the US believes as well that a militia aligned to the Shia bloc, which has now stepped out of government, could largely be responsible for this ongoing instability. Perhaps, and some analysts believe, that the Prime Minister's hand is now strengthened. It was very difficult for him to take action against these Shia militia groups while their political leaders were in Parliament. Now perhaps it may be easier for him, should he so wish, to do so. However, one must remember as well that by their movement out of government, it leaves his fragile administration in a very dangerous position and now reliant on other political parties for support to maintain some semblance of stability, Mariam.
Now, President Bush has also been under a lot of pressure to redouble efforts to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and many observers have been saying that, in fact, Sunni support for Nouri al-Maliki's government is dependent on that.
Well, particularly now with the withdrawal of the Muqtada al-Sadr bloc, because what now happens is that Maliki will be looking to that Sunni moderate groups to prop up his government and to allow him to continue functioning. Now, we do understand as well that there's been ongoing dialogue with these Sunni groups, and they have made very clear through intermediaries that a central precondition for their involvement in the Maliki government would be for the US and the Arab world to address the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Now, this is where everything becomes linked, and this is something that President Bush has opposed, any idea of linkage between Israel, Palestine and Iraq. However, Arab leaders have been stating repeatedly that it's absolutely essential to get some movement on Israel-Palestine before the issue of Iraq can be addressed. And we do know as well that Vice President Dick Cheney was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia over the weekend, holding talks there with the Saudi leaders, and the assumption there is that he was asking the Saudis to bring some pressure to bear on the Sunni groups within Iraq to prop up that Maliki government. He was told that can only be done if Israel-Palestine is addressed, Mariam.
Yes, we will of course keep a close eye on that summit. Mike Hanna in Amman, thank you.
Now, these are live pictures reaching us from Istanbul in Turkey. Pope Benedict there, arriving to meet the Patriarch of the Orthodox Christian Church, Bartholomew. And really 3 stories continuing at once in Turkey and surrounding the Pope and Turkey itself. One is the series of remarks made by the Pope, which many people felt offended Islam back in September. He's tried to bridge the gap. The second is the gap between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church itself. And then there is Turkey's membership of the European Union. The Pope's already called for Turkey to be accepted into the EU, but the European Commission today called for a partial suspension of negotiations over the country's access. Particular concerns Turkey's stance towards Cyprus, and the Turkish Prime Minister has called the decision unacceptable. Well, as we see those live pictures of the Pope at St. George's Church in Istanbul, let's take a look back at events with Alan Fisher.
Europe divided because of a divided Cyprus and events more than 30 years ago. Now it threatens to derail Turkey's attempts to join the EU. Cyprus has been split in 2 since 1974. There's the Turkish-held Republic of Northern Cyprus and the internationally recognised Greek Cypriot South. The Ankara government's refusal to open up its ports and airports to trade with Cyprus, a full EU member, means it hasn't met its obligations, so talks to allow Turkey to join the club have been partially suspended.
These negotiations must continue although at a slower pace. There will be no train crash, but there is a slowing down because of works further down the tracks.
European leaders have been divided about the prospects of mainly Muslim Turkey joining the 25-nation group. France and Germany have never been enthusiastic. Spain and Britain believe it's the wrong time to send a negative message.
We have got to make sure that we allow Turkey's accession to proceed. Now, that will mean compromises all round in order to get this happening. But just at the moment, to send an adverse signal to Turkey, I think, would be a serious mistake.
Talks with Turkey have been going on since October last year, but there's increasing frustration in government and on the streets about the delays.
I think it is good in a sense that the accession talks have been suspended, and I would be glad if they stopped altogether.
I don't approve of the double standards that the EU is trying to apply. My personal view is that under these circumstances we should not enter the EU.
The EU foreign ministers meet next week to approve the Commission's decision. The Finns, who currently hold the EU presidency, will attempt to move the situation on and try to overcome history to make some history. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera.
Returning live there to the scenes inside the Cathedral Church of St George in Istanbul, Pope Benedict and the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church, Bartholomew, side by side. Their closeness there, no indication of the rift there has been between the two branches of the Christian Church, Catholics on one hand and the Orthodox Church on the other. And that part of Pope Benedict's mission, he says, to Turkey, which has a very small Christian population, but an important one in his mind nonetheless. Well, security particularly tight around the Pope, the Catholic Pope, following the attempted assassination of his predecessor by a Turkish gunman many years ago, and that gunman still serving a sentence in prison, has warned the Pope to be aware of any attempts on his life during this trip to Turkey, the third by a pontiff in recent times, most recent 1979. And of course, as we see there, shots of Bartholomew, head of the Orthodox Church. It's worth reflecting on the political elements of this visit too. The Pope, having previously said that he disagreed with Turkey's membership of the European Union, has said on his visit that he now believes it would be right for Turkey to join the European Union. And yet today we hear the EU itself saying it believes this would be the wrong decision. And that's a statement that's been denounced by the Turkish government as unacceptable. Let's bring in our correspondent, Barnaby Phillips. And Barnaby, first of all, the timing of the statement from the European Union during such a high-profile visit when the world's attention is very much on Turkey. No coincidence.
I think within the European Commission there was a feeling that they had to act, that this news of the decision they had come to was going to leak, and so the decision eventually came out of Brussels a few days earlier than had been expected. It was certainly a shock here in Turkey today. As you were saying, good news for Turkey yesterday, with the Pope giving an endorsement to Turkey's EU bid, and then that bad news today. And just flicking through the Turkish TV news channels this afternoon, those words of Prime Minister Erdogan, that this was unacceptable, that this was harsher than had been expected, being echoed again and again. And a lot of pessimism here that this situation with the European Union can be wrapped up in the next 2 weeks. I'm sorry, that it can be resolved in any way. I know that the European Union is saying now the ball is in Turkey's court. If there is some sort of concession over Cyprus at the last minute, we do have the Finnish Prime Minister coming here on Friday. Perhaps some sort of last-minute deal can be done. But the mood here in Turkey is no, that is not possible. That Turkey has been slapped in the face today, and that if Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey were to make some sort of concession, he would be hit very hard by nationalist opposition in the armed forces here in Turkey, who would be perceiving that he was bowing down to European Union pressure.